thousands of years and over countless generations, human beings have worked tirelessly to solve problems and to build a better world. We've built truly impressive structures, traveled to the depths of the sea, and even traveled into the stars themselves. We've developed technologies that people even a century ago could not have believed to be possible. With all of these incredible advances in science and technology, how is it that there are still so many problems that need to be solved? The unfortunate truth of engineering is that sometimes the solutions of today are the problems of tomorrow. But does it have to be this way? Some might say that as an engineer, that's what you should be doing. For every problem you go out there and solve, you should make sure to create at least 2 more problems. Because do you know what they call that? They call that good business. Joking aside, engineers don't go out in the world trying to create even more problems than they solve. The truth of the matter is that problems often arise due to the complexity of the world and the nearly infinite way in which things are interconnected. It's these connections that can be very difficult for engineers to manage, and engineers often have to make trade-offs in their design. It's often these trade-offs that can cause future problems to occur. Let's look at this phenomenon a little bit further. Trade-offs. What are they all about? Trade-offs involve the delicate balance between different elements of your design. As an engineer, you may want to maximize one attribute or element of your design, but to do so, you oftentimes have to do that at the expense of another design element. Consider this example. Let's say that you want to go out there and you want to create an awesome product that's low cost, so you can increase its access to people all around the world. But as you lower the cost of the product, you may actually be doing so at the expense of the quality of that product. You may actually lower the cost so much that the quality would decrease so much as well that your product would no longer solve the problem you set out to solve in the beginning. This is this balance of trade-offs. How low cost do you want to make it versus how much can the quality diminish before the product is no longer effective? Consider another example. Let's say you wanted to have a product that was really strong and durable. To do that, maybe you beef it up and you add a lot more material. But when you add more material, you might actually increase the weight of that product. And if you increase the weight, you're going to make it harder to move that product from place to place. You decrease its mobility. Now let's imagine that this product we're talking about is a car. If you increase the weight of the car, you're going to need more fuel to move it. If you use more fuel, you're producing more carbon dioxide emissions, which, ding, 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 creates more climate change. So on one hand, while the vehicle is strong and durable, which is a selling point in its own regard, you've now created problems in another aspect of your design. Now this is a fairly simple analysis right here. We're looking at just 2 elements, one compared to another. Imagine doing this for hundreds or thousands of different design elements, and you can see how quickly problems can crop up. Now while disasters like the Tacoma Narrows Bridge garner all sorts of attention and fame in the engineering world, all sorts of problems are caused not by math and science failures. That was good. But a lot of problems and failures are caused because engineers don't understand all of the intricacies of these connections and the design elements that we were just discussing. What I want you to do now is using this same kind of principle that we've discussed. Take a second and think about a product that solved a problem, but that either created another problem right in that moment in time, or later on down the road. Take a second, well, probably take a little bit longer than that. Take a minute, pause your video, and think about some of these different examples, and we'll come right back. Maybe my mention of the word roads has got you thinking about the automobile, a classic case of the solutions of today or the problems of tomorrow. What problem was the automobile setting out to solve? Well, it helped address the issue of mobility, to get people from one place to another a lot faster, and carry their groceries. It's also given us loads of entertainment. 13 Fast and Furious movies, woo! Best movie franchise of all time. But in addition to solving problems, the automobile has caused lots of problems on its own. This parking lot behind me, which is empty, is an example of that. It's a giant impervious surface that's affecting the flow of water into the ecosystem. Cars also cause pollution, not only sound pollution, but pollution into the atmosphere, carbon dioxide that's exacerbating global warming. And they also produce all sorts of other pollutants that affect the respiratory system and human health. That's not good. Cars create all sorts of other issues. Who hasn't been stuck in traffic? It's the worst. It's the bane of everyone's existence. And cars also kill. Traffic fatalities are a major issue around the world. So although cars have solved lots of issues, lots of other issues have sprouted up as a direct result of them. As an engineer, you can be great at math and science, but you really need to understand the implications of the different design choices you make. Because if you don't, you're going to make all sorts of other problems. One of my favorite examples of this inability to see the consequences of your actions is this pencil right here. This pencil says, initially, too cool to do drugs. Man, what a good statement. Very empowering. But as you sharpen that pencil down, it goes from saying it's too cool to do drugs to actually saying cool to do drugs. After that, it just says do drugs and then eventually drugs. Initially that pencil, yeah, sure, it works, it writes, but the initial goal of that pencil to convince children maybe or people to not do drugs, that you're too cool, you have the power, eventually becomes this really bad message telling you to do drugs. The exact opposite of the message you were trying to send. So as an engineer, you've got to understand all of these trade-offs and how the different elements of your design work, especially time. Now we know it would be impossible as an engineer to understand how every single thing in the world is interconnected and to fully understand the consequences of every single design decision that you make. While that's impossible, you do have a responsibility to do your best. Let's meet someone who can share with you some principles to ensure that your solutions do not become the problems of tomorrow.
Hey everyone, I'm Nicole Mogul. I teach in the Clark School of Engineering. I also help out with the College Park Scholars Program. In the Clark School, I teach ENE 200, which is a course where we investigate what the ethical responsibilities of engineers are. As an engineer, you have a fundamental ethical responsibility. While your designs may bring about benefits for some, there will almost always be some adverse effects. As an engineer, you can follow several principles throughout the design process to help diminish any negative effects of your designs. Principle 1, to not cause harm. The Rawls difference principle says it is not just or fair to ask a single group to bear all the negative impacts of a design, especially a group that is already disadvantaged. For this one, you need the skills of empathy. While this is especially critical in the first step of the engineering design process, researching and defining the problem, it is a skill that is important throughout the design process, as you select and identify stakeholders, as well as you consider the lifespan of your project and the upkeep that is necessary to keep it operational in the long run, as well as how it will be disposed of when it has reached the end of its life. Principle 2, to try to prevent harm and any unreasonable risk of harm. For this, you need to have skills to understand the context of the problem that you are trying to address and the environment in which you are working. This requires you to obtain all sorts of information that may not seem relevant to your problem at hand. When you are working with stakeholders, we explained it's important to start off by asking broad, open-ended questions. For example, let's say you're designing a backpack for someone. You might start off by asking them about their hopes and their hobbies before jumping in and asking questions about your product design, because a lot of this information might be invaluable throughout the design process. Principle 3 is that you should try and alert and inform about the risk of harm. To do this, you need the skills to communicate. Communication means that you should keep people informed about your project, but you also need to be able to listen in order to understand what unintended consequences there are that you might not know. It may be hard, but you need to learn to take critical feedback and learn from it. The final principle is to work to the best of your ability to serve the legitimate interests of your employer or client. For this, you need the skills to be a change agent. It is incumbent upon you as an engineer to take responsibility for the product you are designing and the context in which it is being designed. You need to bring about change not only in the products you create, but by affecting the systems that produce these products. The first step is to realize that you not only have the responsibility to do this, but you have the power and ability to do this as well.